Hello, everyone. My name is George Moutafis, and I am the world history teacher for your UC Tech freshmen. I hope that the year has started off great for you and your student, and that I hope all is well with you and your families for sure. What I'd like to do with this video today is I want to tell you a little bit about the course that your students are taking right now, our world history course. Now, I will say this much in regards to the world history course that we're taking. This scope and sequence is extremely extensive. Unlike their sophomore and junior years, where they are covering a 100 to 200 year window of American history, the freshmen are tasked with the Herculean effort to cover 1,000 years of history from multiple different perspectives, from multiple different nations, fully encompassing politics, culture, society, economics, and all these other factors as well, for sure. So it is quite an extensive course, but we figured out a way how to navigate through it and basically start from the year 1000 and work all the way up to the present day. So what I'm going to do for you right now is I'm going to share my screen with you, so this way you can get a glimpse to see what the syllabus looks like, and I'll explain a little bit more about our course as we go on. So I'm going to share my screen with you all. So first and foremost, we divide up our school year into 4 different parts. This world history course covers 4 broad eras of world history. The first of which, we begin the year off in modernity. The first unit of the year dealt with the modern world. We basically looked at and saw what is going on in the world from all the different continents. What we ended up doing is we basically went to every continent and basically took a snapshot to understand what's going on politically, culturally, socially, economically, and so on and so forth. The idea behind it is very simple. The idea is that, similar to a jigsaw puzzle, when you know what the picture looks like from the get-go, when you start putting the pieces together as we traverse through the course of history, what will end up happening is your student will be able to start making connections to be like, well, I know what the end result looks like. So as we progress through, they'll start making connections to be like, I see how this event leads to this condition today. And as we move on further and further, they'll be able to make further connections and say, okay, I can see how what happened in this era and what's going on right now in this topic that we're studying is connecting to explain why certain things are happening the way they are in our modern day world today. So we start off our year in the age of exploration, which looks at the time period in which Europeans set sail and went to all the different corners of the earth. And we obviously discussed the cultural, economic, and social impacts and political impacts of how that affected not only Europe, but the Americas, Africa, and Asia as well. From there, we move on to the age of revolution, where we basically look at and see the initial infancy steps of democratization, in which we begin to see people all throughout the Atlantic world overthrowing absolute monarchy. This time period that we look at is a time period in which we see the fighting back against the idea of absolute monarchy. And we see this through events such as the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, the American Revolution, the revolution that took place in Mexico, the fight of liberation in South America as well. And what we also do is we also do a comparative study where we're like, okay, so this period of enlightenment, does it apply to everyone? When the Enlightenment was going on, did it truly provide everyone with rights and freedoms, or was it only to a specific few? And what we also do as a Socratic seminar at the end of this unit is we basically ask ourselves that, okay, while this is going on in the Atlantic world, why is none of this happening in Asia? That's kind of a concluding piece. Also in this time period, we begin to look at the phenomenon of nation building. Before the late 1700s, the idea of a nation really didn't exist. Instead, you simply were a loyal subject to a monarch or an emperor or whatever the case may be. The idea of people owning their own nation and doing their part within the nation was a relatively new phenomenon. And it's also something that we study in the Age of Revolution, the development of this idea of nationalism and the creation of nations. We also end up that unit looking at the Napoleonic era and to see how that had an adverse effect, especially in Europe as well. From there, we move on to the age of industrialization, where we look to see how a transition takes place, how we see a transition from agriculture to industry happens right before our eyes, how we see a transition from people living in agricultural settings to urban settings, and what type of an impact that'll have economically and politically and socially as well. And within this time frame as well, what we also begin to study is we also begin to see just how the idea of political philosophy begins to develop as well. For the large part, especially in the West, you begin to see a lot of the formation of political ideology take shape during the Industrial Revolution. Because prior to the Industrial Revolution, power only truly remained in one specific circle of people, with the monarch. But with the increasing of more liberties to people, with the spread of growing democracy in all the different pockets of the world, we begin to see that people obviously have different socioeconomic statuses. And because of this, we also see the development of political ideology as well. So what we do in this unit as well of industrialization is we also begin to see the formation of the political spectrum as well, and all the different ideologies that go along with each sector of the spectrum as well. From there, we wrap up the year in the era of the Great Wars, where we look at the era of imperialism and how this impacted Africa, Asia as well. We also begin to study the Great War period, where we look at World War I, we look at World War II, and the Cold War. And then more importantly, we also begin to see the decolonization process, where a lot of these countries in Asia and in Africa begin to say, we want nothing more to do with our European overlords. We want to begin to form our own nations as well. And we see that transition and the logistics behind that as well. We also see what happens in Latin America as well, and how they too are beginning to want to break away from the oligarchical bonds that hold them and try and form and discover their own forms of democracy as well. And within the context of all of this is the overarching debate between capitalism and free marketism and democracy versus communism as well, and how that also plays a part in these nations' efforts to gain liberty for themselves. And by June, we should be at the fall of the Soviet Union, which ties in perfectly to what we did in September, looking at the modern day world. And in this effort, we cover 1,000 years worth of history. Now, let's look at some of the mechanics of the course itself. So first and foremost, I'd like to draw your attention to the grading policy. So first and foremost, it sounds like a pretty radical idea. I've done this for the past 2 years and with a good amount of success. But when it comes to tests in this course, I do not give any in-class tests whatsoever. Every single test is a take-home test. So if you hear your students saying, yeah, I'm taking a test right now, it's probably from my course. So the idea behind it is very simple. One of the biggest aspects of my teaching philosophy is I want to prepare my students for the real world. And quite frankly, the idea of going to work, sitting down and taking a test to prove to know your knowledge doesn't happen anywhere. Instead, what we have to do in the real world, regardless of whatever field you're in, you have to take what you know, you have to understand what your resources are, and you have to complete some type of a task. And that is exactly what my take-home tests do in this course, where I tell my students, take what you've learned from the unit, use whatever resource you want, whether it's from our class or whatever else is out there. And from there, complete a series of tasks. I can tell you this much, the take-home test, there is no multiple choice on it. It's very specifically, I will give them an excerpt from a newspaper or a magazine or a political cartoon and ask them to analyze it. I may ask them to complete a task where they may have to find an article to prove a point. And then also what I typically do is also provide them with mini essays where I basically give them the arduous task of having to basically answer a question in a concise fashion. No fluff writing, just get straight to the point, make your argument, provide your evidence, and make commentary to show how your argument and evidence help to prove your overall position. And in this way, that is how tests work in here. They are take home, and that is the reason why we do that. Now, in addition, another aspect that I also believe firm in is the fact that not everyone is a good test taker. Even in the take home setting, some people struggle with that as well. And I honestly feel that shouldn't be a method of dragging someone's grade down. So instead, what I have done is in our course, every unit ends with a test and a project. Now, the project could be a lot of different things. The project could be a paper. It could be the creation of a museum exhibit, preparing for a mock trial. It could be creating a lesson that they will teach their fellow classmates, and a lot of other different things as well. The idea behind it is very simple, that just because you're not a good test taker doesn't mean it should dramatically impact your grade. So the idea is very simple. By having the students create something, it gives them a window of an opportunity to show what they know, to create something to illustrate what they've learned from the unit. Also, there are quizzes in here as well from time to time. Sorry, that's an announcement. I'm recording this at school right now, so I'm very sorry for the announcement. So quizzes are also given from time to time as well, as a check to see if the student has done their homework, or as a barometer to see how they're doing at that juncture of the unit as well. Homework equates to 15% of the grade as well. And then this last portion is classwork and participation, which is 10%. And this last 10% may not seem like a lot, but it actually is a huge difference, because classwork and participation just asks the students to do 3 things every single day. Come here prepared, come here willing to work, and come here with a positive attitude. If they do that on a consistent basis, they earn that full 10%. And it might not seem like a lot, but truthfully, what ends up happening is that last 10% is a huge grade shift. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a student earn that full 10% and go from a B to an A, from a C to a B, from a D to a C, and so on and so forth. So it might not seem like a lot, but just by showing up, being prepared, and just giving your best effort, it really does help the student as well. And truthfully, if we think about it, if you do those things on a day-to-day basis in your regular life as well, something is going to get done for sure. And that is part of the philosophy of this course. It's not enough to learn about what's going on here. What's also important is to be able to prepare yourself for the real world, which overall leads me to one last component of this course. And that is my 3 A's of success. Because regardless of whatever field your student is going to go into in the future, whether they're going to go into medicine or the law or engineering or something dealing with the sciences, or maybe they'll be an entrepreneur or work with and have a skill that they're going to work with, whatever the case may be, in order to be successful, I've found that in a humble way, you have to have the ability to do 3 things. You have to have the ability to analyze, you have to have the ability to argue, you have to have the ability to articulate. So very quickly, the ability to analysis, to understand what's going on, the who, the what, the where, when, the why, the how it all blends together, how each player has a different component, how they interlink with one another. It's basically to be able to have the ability to fully understand what the situation is. The ability to argue next is, okay, in a realm of possibility of many answers, what is your position and how do you defend it? What evidence can you create? What counter arguments can you bring up to basically defend your position? And then lastly, it is the ability to articulate. Because I fully believe that if you have this incredible ability to understand a situation, if you have all these great ideas up here on how to defend yourself and defend with the position that you have, but you don't know how to share it with the world, that in essence is a waste of a beautiful mind. Because it isn't enough to be able to analyze. It isn't enough to be able to create an argument. You have to be able to share it as well. And articulation can come in a lot of forms. It isn't just simply speaking. It isn't simply writing. It could be the creation of something. It could be a visual art. It could be a myriad of different things. But regardless, you have to be able to share what's going on here. And truthfully, every single lesson is designed to incorporate all 3 of these components. In every single one of our lessons, we are analyzing history, we are arguing about history, and we are articulating our position on history as well. And in this sense, that in a nutshell is basically our world history course. If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to send me an email. You can also call. My extension is 880. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope all is well with you and your families. And I look forward to the rest of the school year and, teaching your student about world history. I hope all is well. You be safe and have a great one. Take care, everyone.